Welcome back. So, in this video, we will see what is an API and how the API structure looks like, and a few of the benefits, so that we can come to know why the API is becoming more popular these days. Okay, so let's get started. So, here the API abbreviation means Application Programming Interface. Let's see what the definition says. Okay, so the definition says that an API that provides a set of functionality. So the functionality could be like a function or a method or chunk of code that performs a certain task or a specific task. Okay, so one of the simplest example is your calculator application on your machine. Okay, so calculator, so if we talk about a calculator, it performs specific tasks like addition of two numbers or multiplication of two numbers. This each functionality, I can say, a kind of an API, so that takes request as numbers from the user and performs a certain operation and gives the result in terms of the response. Okay, so so I can say that any application that is performing certain action, I can call that an API. Okay, now let's get to know more details about the API. So in other words, we can say that API is basically a contract in between two systems or two applications to communicate. Okay, so here the two applications that I'm talking could be on the same machine or also could be in different machines, that is residing in two geographical location. So there is no restriction where exactly the application is, and also like there is no restriction on what kind of technology we have used for that particular application to work. So so that contract, so now here I'm saying API is a contract, right? So that contract basically determines or defines the rules of how to use these services. Okay, so like basically what happens, so let's take an example. Let's say that one application that is built on ASP.NET, okay, and another application that is built on PHP. Now these both the applications, the PHP application can utilize the APIs of the ASP.NET. But how? So the way they will communicate, because they have to follow certain rules so that they can understand each other to communicate, so that they can help each other to perform certain task. Okay, so now let's see how exactly an API structure looks like. Okay, so here I'm giving a simple architecture of API, or kind of an overview. So I'm not going into more details about the implementation, but to make you understand how exactly the API looks like. So let's talk about an application. So let's say that Facebook application. Okay, so most of us are using Facebook, right? So what happens if Facebook, if you see, it has different interfaces, like you can access that from your laptop, from desktop, or also from your mobile devices like mobile application, or else from mobile web browsers as well. So there are what you call multi platforms are there where you can utilize the, or where you can use the Facebook. Okay, and also if you see that maybe the web application on your laptop that you are using may be built on different language, but when you talk about your mobile application, or the Facebook application in mobile, may be built on different language, but they perform certain actions or similar actions, like you can log into the Facebook by using the same credentials. So like let's say that you have a Facebook account, you can log in by using the web browser on your laptop, and also the same credentials you can use that by using your mobile application. Okay, but how does it like works? Because so here exactly the API comes into the picture. Okay, so I'll give you a simple login example of how it actually works. Okay, so if you see, these are the devices. Okay, so like you can use the web browser, or else you can use the mobile devices like the iOS device, or also Android device. So the both the applications on the Android and iOS, the Facebook application is built using different language. Okay, so let's say that a user is using any one of these platforms, and they are opening the Facebook and they are logging in. Now when you log in, you enter your username and password and click on the sign in button. Okay, now once you click on the sign in button, it triggers an API that is on the server. Okay, so let's think that this particular portion is server. Okay, and this is what we are at, and this is your internet. Okay, so now when you enter the username and password, it goes through the HTTP protocol. Okay, so it uses the HTTP protocol to communicate your data. Now what format the data is, the data could be an XML or a JSON, because if you see the interface of the web browser and the mobile device is different, so they have to, like as I told, they have to use a common contract so that they can communicate each other. Okay, so that is why we need to have a data format that is like understandable by this application and the server as well. So when you log in here by using the username and password, it converts into a JSON or an XML. The same way, if you are like logging in by using the mobile application, that also converts into a XML or JSON. Okay, now so up to this point only the platform is different, but once it converts the data into JSON or an XML, the same way your micro, so now here the microservices is also built on different. So let's say that the microservice is .NET and this is PHP, this is some, let's say that Ionic framework, and here it is like, let's say that it is .NET. Okay, so now these three are different platforms, they are built on different platform, but the way it is giving the request is a JSON, and the way it is accepting or this is understanding, so that is also a JSON. So there is no problem with that. So now the request comes as a JSON to this microservice. Now we were talking about API, but microservices is coming into the picture. Now what is microservices? Microservices are nothing but the, what do you call, the subset of an API. So an API, so at the beginning what we understood, API is set of functionality. Now the microservices divides the API into different, into small functionalities. So like login functionality is a microservice. So let's say that the upper stack is a login microservice, means the logic written for login functionality is one microservice. Okay, so now when it gives the request the JSON, now there is a address, actually there is an address that we will know at the later point of time. So whenever we are triggering that or clicking on the sign in button, we are redirecting, like the program is written such a way that the sign in button will, like when you click on the sign in button, it will directly send this JSON to the login microservice only, because the login microservice there is an address to that. Okay, so when you click on the sign in button, the data goes to that particular address. So we will come to know what is exactly the API addresses, or we call it as an endpoint. Endpoints are nothing but it is redirecting the data to a particular or the specific microservice that can perform that particular task. Okay, so now we got to know. So now the data is coming as a JSON to the login microservice. Now what happens, this microservice basically searches the credentials into the database and validates if that credential is correct or not. If the data is correct, then it gives back again in terms of JSON or an XML, because they both has to communicate each other. Now the way it gives the response, if the login is successful, then it gives you a response as successful. Now the application is written such a way that if the login is successful, it will give you the home page. If the login is not successful, let's say that this particular login microservice is saying that the login is not or the credentials are not correct, then the response whatever this application is getting, Now it understands the JSON, right? So it will give you the same login page to re-enter the username and password. So the concept is very simple actually. Now we'll see why. Now you might have a question that now, now why we are like here learning the API, where we are talking about it's a method, then we can have several methods for several what you call functionalities, and then we can call that method depending on what functionality we want to execute or perform the action on our application. But the the API or the microservices job is not only that much, so it has more scope beyond the methods that we will come to know more details. Okay, so now here we come to know login. The same way, let's say that you are posting. Okay, so you are posting a message in onto the Facebook. Okay, now the same way, so there are different ways, right? You can post the messages. So you can post the message by using the web browser, by using the mobile also. The same way again, when you logging in, then you post a message. Let's say that you are posting the message from like a web browser. Okay, what it does, the same way you are sending the data actually, like on the login how you send the username and password, here you are sending the string that you are going to post. Now what happens again, the same way, when you click on post, it triggers another endpoint like an address. Okay, and that address will determine which microservice it has to execute that. Okay, now once it takes the request, it will save into the database, and then it gives you a response. Now what is that response? That response is nothing but it's a what you call customized response that you will see on your news feed or your profile feed, where you can see your message that you posted. Okay, so this is the way. Now, so this is I'm talking in terms of one application like a Facebook only, but there are what you call, as I told, the API functionality is not limited to only this one. Okay, you can even talk the APIs can talk even from different applications also, like as I was telling at the beginning, that the application, it can be within the same application, or else it will the communication can happen in between two different applications that are residing in two different geographical locations. Now let's see how that works in this way. Okay, so here you can see there is something another another picture comes out, that is nothing but external microservices. Okay, now to understand this one more, let me give you another example. Okay, now let's talk about a travel application, like a travel site where you can enter the source and destination, and you can click on search flight. Let's say that flight service website. Okay, now you go to some application. Let's talk about an application, for an example, kayak.com. So in the kayak.com, what happens when you enter the source and the destination and click on search flight, what it does, it goes to here. Let's talk about this one. Let's think that this particular web browser or the mobile application, you are accessing kayak.com, and you are sending the parameter as source and destination. Okay, and when you click on search flight, now the kayak application is built such a way that when you click on search flight, what it does, it points to a microservice. Let's say that here is the search microservice. Okay, now what this search microservice will do, this will redirect again to different microservices. Now this kayak search microservice will go to different other microservices. Let's say that it will send the request to indigo indigo service, it will again send the request to Etihad, it will request the service to Delta Airlines. The same way, it will redirect the request to different microservices, because see, even Indigo, Air India, or Delta Airline, all these have their own APIs, and they exposed their own APIs. So kayak.com or the kayak search microservice is using those microservices, external microservices, and getting the responses. Now what this search microservice will get the responses depending on the flight availability, from external microservices, and it will gather all the responses and it will customize those responses and give you as a search result. Okay, so now the same way even kayak.com has its own what do you call APIs also for its own application. Let's say login. The same way if you are logging in, like it will not depend on other microservices. It will have its own login microservice which will determine if the credentials are correct or not. Okay, so this way it has its own APIs and also it is sending the request to other microservices on the cloud or on different geographical locations. Now you got to know. So let's say that in our previous like example we have seen, like if we would have only kept the methods only. Now what happens, the methods that we are writing on our application, we cannot use those methods into different what do you call, and we cannot expose our methods into different applications, or they might not have access to our methods because those are only internally written. But when we talk about APIs, we are not actually giving them the logic. Actually we are giving them the portion of the data, I mean the JSON data that they can utilize. So it's basically we are exposing our APIs, that is not the implementation but the results actually. The same way other APIs is giving us. It's like let's say that you are sending the search request to Indigo Airlines. Now Indigo Airline need not to show you the implementation, it will only show you the availability of the flights. So let's say that there are 5 flights that are available from the source and destination with different time slots. So they will only give you the search result, not the implementation. Okay, so API is basically giving you the result only, not the implementation or not the logic. So this way, without knowing, so even we don't know what kind of technology the Etihad Airways or the Indigo Airlines has what do you call implemented, or whether they have built on PHP or in C sharp or ASP.NET or anything. They are just giving us the response, and the response will be in terms of XML and JSON. So they will all communicate via HTTP protocol and with a data format XML and JSON. So they need not to know each other's implementation. Just they are using their exposed APIs or the search results, and they and we will utilize those search results and we will perform our task. Okay, so I hope it gives an overview of what is exactly an API is. Okay, now let's see that. So few benefits I just already spoke, but let's structurize those benefits. Okay, so as you see the benefit, one of the benefit is APIs make an easy integration between two different applications. Like as we come to know that we can utilize another's API to to enhance our application capability. Okay, easy integration, why it is? Because we have a contract that each other can understand that. And also another thing, like if some API is available onto the market, or some organization is exposing their APIs or some functionalities that we want to implement in our application, so we don't want to like rewrite that. Okay, we can utilize their APIs. So here reusability comes into the picture. So reusability we already know, like as a technology like guys, that if a method is there we can call that as many as times to reduce the redundancy. But like that is only limited to a single application only. But when we are talking APIs, we can utilize another API, and then we can reduce the effort of rewriting the same functionality only. Okay, and this leads to the faster development, because you need not to think about that particular module, because that is already built by somebody and you can utilize that. So in this way we might get one question that like what is the benefit, like I'm having an API and I'm exposing that and people are using that, like what is the benefit I'm getting here? So one benefit is that like benefit in terms of monetary. Let's say that we are talking what kind of monetary benefit that I'm getting. So when I expose my APIs, so I'm saying that I have these many capabilities that I'm giving you. But if you need some other capabilities or some customized capability, then I can do that for you. So, and for that, I might charge you extra. So, in that way, I can get the benefit from there. Okay. So, let's say that one small example, I can finish this session like Google API. So, we all use Google Maps, right? So, let's say we are using Uber to like search for vehicles to go from one source to another destination. Okay, so what exactly Uber does? So Uber gives you an interface or a application which is using the Google Maps API. Okay, so now it takes the Google Maps API into the Uber application, which helps you to locate where you are or your current geographical location, and then it searches the different vehicles that are surrounding you. Now let's say that Uber might need some customized what do you call customized API or customized functionality from Google Maps. So Uber can request to Google Map, hey Google Map, I need few different APIs that can you build for me, because they have already their own what do you call logic written, so they can add few more logics that is only meant for the Uber requirement only. So that way Uber can pay and Google Maps can get benefited. So in upcoming videos we will see how the testing is important for these APIs, and we will see how we can perform functional or the manual testing for the APIs, and also we will see how we can even do the automation testing of the APIs. Okay, so hope this session helps. Thanks for watching, and do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you didn't.